Welcome back. It is a joy to introduce our next guest. When I think of amazing people doing amazing things, Tony Catanese's face just he might as well be the poster child in the encyclopedia if anybody looks at those things anymore. So his whole purpose in life is to inspire others, and his really solid purpose and belief is that there's so much life to live. By living yours, you can share with others and inspire them to achieve their goals. And so I think every one of us certainly gets to a point in our lives where that is our purpose and it's why we're here. So, Tony, thank you so much for joining us on Good Day.
Well, thank you, Lauren. I appreciate that introduction.
Well, when we first met, honestly, I think I told you, you would have had me at three rescue dogs, three special rescue dogs, and 20 or 30 rescue birds.
Right.
And that would have been a conversation unto itself. But the truth is, as we got into it, and I followed your trail a little bit more deeply, I thought, how many of us are living into our next, as I often refer to it, and we're so blessed to have that to do that the best thing we can do is share it with others. So you are an inspiration. You've inspired me. I know you're going to inspire our audience, and you've
Thanks.
got an amazing story. So I don't want to say start from when you were born, but
Okay.
just a little background.
Okay. Well, I won't start when I was born, but I think that background is really important because the life I'm living today is totally different from the life that I thought I would be living. I was born and raised in Brooklyn in the 50s. And both my parents were factory workers. And I was the first one to go to college in my whole family. I have a big Italian family, lots of aunts and uncles, cousins. So growing up, there was a lot of love and support. Um, and when I went to college, I went as an accounting major, which is even hard for me to believe right now. But to me, growing up in Brooklyn, having parents who worked in factories, an accountant was someone with a suit, an attaché case, someone who was respected, and someone who made pretty good money. Well, I started university as an accounting major, and through some fluke, I was asked to audition for one of the productions. I auditioned, fell in love with theater, changed my major. My parents were so happy because I was in college, so they didn't care what degree I got. And I eventually got a bachelor's degree in theater, went into the service, served in the Navy during the Vietnam War. And then when I was discharged, I had the VA to support me. And so I went to the American Academy in New York. So that's a long way of saying. Then I did about 10 years of theater, lived in Manhattan for 10, 15 years, had a really exciting life. And then when I was in my 30s, got to the point where I was in a rut and I thought I needed a change. I had worked with young people at summer camps. I taught for a while in New Haven, Connecticut, but I knew I needed to get out of New York. And so I took the risk, not knowing anyone in Colorado, where I am now, but there was a teaching position open. Uh, Everyone that loved me in New York said, "This is not for you. You're a New Yorker. Colorado is not the kind of place you want to be in." But I took the risk. There was something calling me out here. And after 1 year, I realized I made the right choice. I met my future wife. I stayed at the teaching job for 28 years. I live in the foothills now with, as you said, rescue dogs, rescue birds. I have deer and elk all around me. Um, so it's a totally different lifestyle. Uh, and I really believe there was something spiritual calling me here uh, because I really wasn't getting support to make that move. So one of the things that I learned about myself is to believe in yourself and what is your passion, which we'll talk about later, um, and what does your heart tell you to do. Um, so anyway, I arrived here. Like I said, I met my wife. We've been married 33 years now. Live up here in the foothills. Um, Taught and love doing that. Then I always volunteered, so I knew I needed to make that a part of my life. And I started by volunteering at the Hospice of St. John here, and that became a part of my life for quite a few years. And I learned so much from volunteering there, from the people who were passing, from the staff. And so much of my life today is volunteering because I am retired. I'm going to stop talking. So ask me a question. I
So
kind of
as
brought
you're
you up to
talking,
date. Yeah,
honestly, I know that first of all, you tell a beautiful story. And I'm not inclined to interrupt that story because you know it better than any of us. And as you're speaking, I know I'm traveling with my own story in my head that says, yes, as a former New Yorker,
right.
everybody said, wait a minute, you're so New York. How do you live anywhere else?
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
So when I moved to Istanbul, when I moved to Southern California, they were like, oh my God, you're totally coming back. And ultimately, I love to go back as a visitor. I,
Right,
but sometimes those times pass, but the willingness and ability to hear yourself, listen to yourself, trust your gut is really powerful. And a lot of people have never left their hometown out of fear. So
right,
I applaud your listening, and I know that that courage is something that you have passed on to your students and to your mentees and to everyone you've worked with. So let's back up for 1 second because
okay.
you did work in New York City theater for a long time. Did you have a favorite production?
Um, I would say my favorite production was a touring production of West Side Story, which I choreographed and played Bernardo. And we toured for 15 weeks. Um, and that was a highlight for me. And so I did a lot of choreographing, performing, um, did work in New York, uh, did lots of tours, which gave me an opportunity to travel around the country, to see other places. Um, None of the tours were out this way. A lot of them were down south in Florida, at
Oh, so
different.
you hadn't gotten out to Colorado by way of any of these programs.
Exactly. And when I knew that I needed to make the switch from being in Manhattan, I looked at positions either in Europe or west of the Mississippi. I knew I needed a complete break. And so this opportunity came up in Colorado. Um, and I'm blessed in that my teaching career has taken me from third graders to university level. And I look back now and I was comfortable with all those different levels. Um,
And in all of that, you're teaching acting, you're teaching
Teaching
all different
theater.
stage functions, everything involved in theater.
Right. And so, I was blessed. I worked with a lot of students who were uh, not academically at their best, but once they found the arts and an outlet, their academics improved. Several of my students went on to do theater, but that was not my purpose with educational theater. Educational theater was teaching about learning how to collaborate, learning to trust other people, learning to get up in front of an audience and speak. So all of those qualities that they learned, regardless of what profession they went into, I believe all the arts help with that.
Transferable skills, every single one. And this part of the conversation could not be more timely, especially with what's happening in the arts and in education today. Every time a program gets cut, my heart just breaks more
Right.
because I know that it was, me playing Sarah Brown in Guys and Dolls when I was 12 at
Uh,
in summer camp production, getting up on stage in front of hundreds of parents and peers
right.
and really being able to, oh my God, sing.
Right.
No, I think back on it, I'm a little bit, I feel like I was just enough out of my mind to not say
Uh-huh.
no.
Uh-huh.
But those moments of learning and though your willingness as a kid, as a young person in the third grade that you're teaching, the willingness to say yes is what allows you then 10 years later to be the president of the debate team or
Right.
the
Right.
president of the theater club
Right.
or
And
just
if
get
you
up
go
and
in,
speak.
if your profession takes you into business to be able to conduct a business meeting,
Yes.
that kind of thing. And I mean, I could go off on that tangent about the arts, the theater, the visual arts, music, and so forth. But, part of my volunteer work is in hospitals. I think I mentioned to you, I volunteer at St. Anthony Hospital here. And the arts for people that are recuperating, that are going through uh, not only physical but emotional turmoil, also how art therapy, music therapy can help them and accelerate the recovery process.
Yeah.
Um, because as you know, it's not just physical, it's what's happening emotionally, it's happening what's happening mentally. So I believe strongly that when you're recuperating from anything, that yes, you need to work on your body, but you also need to work on those other areas. And I think the arts help with that so much.
They absolutely do. And dance being part of that, just changing your physiology. I know 2 years ago when my mom had her stroke, everything was about relearning language and
That,
learning to remember things and finding words. And she could do that through songs that she knew that she loved. She used to sing also. And so she knew the whole score to Fiddler on the Roof and The Sound of Music. And by recalling that and making her move with the music,
uh-huh,
tying all those parts together, I think most people don't equate the power of the arts with how it intellectually supports everything we do. So yes,
exactly,
I agree.
exactly.
I
And I'm going to bring this in because we had spoken about it before. Uh, I didn't start things in my life until I was in my 70s. I retired when I was 70 um, because I felt I still loved teaching. And I told the headmaster at my school 3 years prior to that, you need to tell me when you see I'm not relating to the kids or the kids aren't relating to me or I'm not doing the quality work that I expect of myself. And, he, those 3 years, he said, you're fine, come back next year. But at 70, I thought, he's going to be telling me this, for a few more years.
Oh
And I need
yeah.
to spend some time on myself. So that's a long way of getting into here I am in my 70s now, and I'm not teaching anymore. Uh, and I knew that I had to satisfy uh, urges that I had. So I picked up things that I had never done before, and
Like what?
um, like I've been taking the Native American flute for 3.5 years now. And I didn't start that until I was in my 70s. If someone would have told me in my 40s, even 30s, you're going to be learning the Native American flute, I would have said, no, you're talking about somebody else.
Are you
Uh,
performing it? Because my guess is if you learn something, you suddenly find a way to
and,
share.
yeah, and we have a flute circle that meets once a month, and I get to meet all these other people, some who have been playing Native American flute for 40 years. We bring in professional Native American flute players from different tribes here in Colorado, uh, get lessons from them. Um, but that's one thing. And then, I did a lot in theater, so it was a very collaborative art, like I was mentioning. And I love that, working with set designers and lighting designers. But then when I retired, I started saying, I want to do some writing. And so I enrolled in a class, in a creative writing class. And within 3 years, I self-published a book, which is called Kuko's Cart. And, you know, I never thought I would be doing something like that. So, yeah, I'm in my 70s. As I mentioned to you, I just had a birthday in February. I turned 80. Um, I, I'm going to do things in my 80s that I've never done before. Uh,
Yes, you are.
but,
I
but
have no
getting back
doubt, and we want to follow you along with that.
But
So as
getting back to the book, I just want to throw
yeah,
this in because we were talking about the arts.
yeah.
Um, it's called Kuko's Cart, and it's based on a dog that I used to have, and he passed several years ago. But he slipped a disc, and he was in a cart for his hind legs. That my wife, she researched it. You see lots of dogs now in those carts, but at that point, you couldn't just go out and get one. So it was special ordered. Um, and we knew that he wasn't in any pain or anything like that. Um, but the vets did talk about quality of life and should we put him down and so forth. Uh, and we couldn't do that. And so we got the car, and he lived another 7, 8 years and just maneuvered this cart like it was his Mercedes Benz. He just loved it. Um, so I knew that I wasn't an illustrator. So I wanted someone who had a disability to illustrate it. So there's a long way of going back to what we were talking about, the arts. So I found this group here in Colorado, and they work with people who have disabilities. And I met this autistic young man who is in his late 20s, and he illustrated the book. And that collaborative process of working with someone with that disability, his mind, his imagination came up with visuals that I never, ever would have thought of myself. And so I would talk about Kuko, I would show him photos, and then he came up for each page with some kind of visual to tell the story. Um, so
Amazing.
that's another outlet that, something said, you got to try this, Tony. It doesn't mean you have to be successful. You're doing it for you, but in a way, it turned out it was for
Again, you turned it
everybody.
into something to inspire other
Yeah.
people.
And I,
And while we're talking about Kuko, I hear the birds in the background, and I know
right,
the dogs have settled down. Since we started the interview, they seem to be
all right.
participating nicely. Tell us about your rescue initiative.
Well, both my wife and I volunteer at animal shelters. That's why we have so many animals, because we're foster failures. Uh, when I first started volunteering, I thought, oh, those poor people, they're failures. But now I know what it means. You foster, you fall in love, and you
Right.
don't want to give up the animals. So we have 3 dogs, and I think I sent you a photo of them. Um, and one of them is 12 years old, and we rescued, no, I'm sorry, she's 14. Her name is Honey, and she's a poodle, and we rescued her. She was uh, probably about a year and a half, and she was being physically abused. And because of that abuse, she became deaf. So she's been deaf all her life. But happiest little dog. She knows sign language. She knows to eat. Um, but when the other dogs start barking, she doesn't hear that. But she sees them and she goes, "This must be something good." So she starts barking too. Uh, and then we have a second dog who is from Cindy is my wife, from her shelter, um, who lost an eye. So he only has one eye. And because he's a rescue, we really don't know the background, how he lost it. And then the third one, Tater, uh, we rescued about a year and a half ago. He was brought up from New Mexico. Our shelters both go down with vans once a month because Texas and New Mexico have such a problem with overpopulation. They euthanize their animals within a couple of weeks if they're not adopted. And Tater is 3.5 years old. He's a large Chihuahua mix, but he was born with a deformed right leg. So he runs around on his paw. If he was born that way, he thinks he's normal. So he just runs around like a banshee, uh, happy dog. So we have those three who have some kind of disability. The birds are mainly from my shelter because my shelter, Foothills Animal Shelter, we not only have dogs and cats, but we have critters, we have all kinds of animals, and we have birds. So most of our birds are from the shelter, and they're large birds. They're macaws, they're African grays, they're conures. Um, and they were in situations where it was a hoarding situation. A couple of our birds were down in a basement with 15 other birds, no windows, not getting the proper diet. Um, so fall in love with those birds. We take them home. We have the aviary, so all of the big birds have their own cage. They have a healthy diet. They come out of their cage once a day when we're feeding them. They're not really flying birds, so they just go to the top of their cage. Um, so they're either from hoarding situations or from a surrender situation where someone becomes elderly and they can't take care of the animal, or they're moving. Um, so we have 20 of those birds right now, and you can show some of those photos.
They're
But we love
fabulous.
them. We love
They're
them.
fabulous. And I mean, obviously they're well loved and they all, as I said, they all posed beautifully for their photos. So
Well,
I think we're used to hearing about dogs and cats and even some critters being rescued, but we don't hear a lot about bird rescue. And it's like anything else. People are crazy and think that they can own these wild animals. So I'm so grateful to know that you're out there helping and
yeah, and this is another thing when we're talking about inspiring people. When I was living in New York doing theater, if someone would have said, "You're going to be living in the mountains with 20 rescue birds,"
you
it would just be so foreign to me. So, my goal is to let people know, regardless of your age, that, there's so much more to you than you think there is.
yeah.
But you've got to, if I could say this, get off your butt, and you need to go out there and pursue.
Yeah.
and if you don't think about yourself, but think about how can I help these dogs? How can I help these birds? How can I help these kids to read? The other volunteer opportunity I do is with reading partners. And, I go into elementary schools and we do a program called Reading Partners. And it's not just teaching the kids how to read, but it's that role modeling. A lot of the kids that I tutor, they don't have a lot of support in their homes and they don't have a lot of stability. But just to have someone, a stranger, come in once a month, I'm sorry, once a week, and be with them for an hour or so, one on one, that opens up their eyes too, that there are people who care and there are things that I can do. And, at the beginning of this year, I was reading at a second grade level and I'm in the third grade. And at the end of the year saying, I'm ready to go into the fourth grade now because I'm at level that I'm supposed to be.
So you
So
sent
those,
me photos. You sent photos of two now men
all
that you've
right.
been mentoring for some time. Tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah, Ali was a little African American boy who was 8 years old, and that's when I had moved here for a few years, and I was teaching in an independent school, and my background is Brooklyn Public School, and so I loved teaching at my school, but I also wanted to get out there and see if I could be there for someone else. And so we were with this program called Denver Metro Partners. And he was living with his grandmother and his two sisters. His father had left, and his mom, 2 years prior to that, was in a car accident and passed away. And so his grandmother was raising the three grandchildren. It was her daughter who passed. And she applied to this program, and I applied to the program, and they asked me would I be comfortable with younger kids. And I said, I've taught from third grade to high school, so I'm comfortable with all. Anyway, they hooked up the two of us. We clicked. His grandmother is one of my best friends today. I was taking American Sign Language at that point. She's an American Sign Language interpreter.
Oh,
And
wow.
we didn't know that before we met. And it
Amazing.
was like the heavens said, this is meant to be. And then Ali, from 8 years old, he's 22 years old now, he's married. And as I was telling you, he and his wife were here for dinner a few weeks ago, and they said, he still calls me Mr. Tony, and you don't have to do that anymore, but that's who he is. Mr. Tony, we have a surprise for you. And I asked him what it was, and he said, you're going to be a grandfather. And just, the tears just could not hold them back. Um,
So
so
wonderful.
he'll be in my life forever, and hopefully, as long
And
as he's
obviously
here.
you inspired him as well.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other gentleman who's in his 50s now, Mitch, um, I met him when I was heading an arts center in Canada, and I was heading the theater program, and he was up there. He's from Detroit. His He was dyslexic, but the best little actor I had ever met. And so I put him in a few of my shows. He um, was amazing, but he couldn't memorize lines because he couldn't read. So at night, we would go out, and we just work on lines by rote and so forth. Once he had the lines, I mean, the most amazing little actor. I've ever worked with. And then we kept in touch. So, his parents invited me to his bar mitzvah. I got to light the candle there. Um, we've kept in touch all these years. He graduated high school. He went out to LA, did some work there in movies, moved back to Detroit. He's a theater teacher now. He's in his 50s, and he's one of the biggest directors in this community outside of Detroit. So I've gone down to see some of his productions like Fiddler on the Roof and Guys and Dolls and so forth. So these two men now are just so much a part of my life. Um,
That's amazing. And again, it is really speaking to living a life with purpose on purpose, right? You know why you're here, you know what you want to do, and you're doing it. And I think rather than some others I know who think about what they would like to do, but are not willing to get up and do it, they're waiting for it to fall in their laps. That's not the way. And our community is not that way. So our good
right.
community is very involved and very vital and always looking for inspiration for their next or serving as inspiration for someone else. So
Someone else,
you're a
right?
perfect fit and your story is beautiful. I know you wanted to recommend another book and
I was just going to say, I love you as an interviewer because you segue without me asking you to segue. And when you were talking about purpose, um, I sent you a photo, but here's the book, and I would highly recommend it to everyone who's watching this because it's exactly what we're talking about. It's called Ikigai, um, and you'll see it in the photo. I just finished reading it. I'm going to go back a little ways. This was recommended by my Japanese friends back in 2001. Again, taking a risk. Um, I applied for a Fulbright for a summer program. And at that time, I was teaching at my school, and they supported me. And I applied for it, I got it, and for one summer, I was in Japan and I was studying the arts. So I got to learn kabuki and all kinds of visual arts, calligraphy, and then also studied the education system there. And the agreement with my school was when I came back, I had a 6 month sabbatical, but I would write 2 plays to do with my students based on Japanese
oh wow.
stories. And so I wrote those, we did the plays and so forth. But anyway, when I was there that summer, I traveled around Japan, but I was with a host family for one of those weeks. And we're still the best of friends after all these years.
No
And
surprise.
and their little kid, they had 2 little girls who are now married and have their own children, but they communicated to me, you need to read this book because they know that I do Tai Chi and, I love Japanese culture and so forth. Um, but I think your viewers would really appreciate it because it's all about living your passion. And Ikigai is all about older people. So what they did was they traveled around the world, and especially in Japan, and interviewed people who were 100 years or older. And every person they spoke to, it was about their lifestyle. They got up in the morning because they had a purpose. And
Right.
even though they were retired, it was planting the vegetable garden, or it was meeting with friends and drinking their green tea, uh, you know, or doing Tai Chi or something like that. And so they had their moments of privacy where they were on their own, but then they definitely had group activities where they could be with other people. And it's just a fascinating book. So I would recommend it also.
Absolutely. We're happy to recommend that. It's very much like the conversation that's happening now around the blue zones.
Exactly. And they mention the blue zone in here. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So Dan Buettner is bringing that conversation up, the Ikigai conversation. Ikigai, as I know it, is the art of a happy life, right? And so basing that in purpose and action and community uh, yields health. It's health, happiness, and if you're going to be on the planet, make it a good one.
Exactly. Exactly. I love
And Tony, I believe you absolutely have done that. So if people want to connect with you directly, is there a way to do that?
There is. I can give my email address.
Our viewers can reach out if they want to learn more, if they feel like maybe they're in your area and
Yeah. Oh,
you
I would love.
connect
Yeah.
because obviously you are a master connector.
Yeah, yeah. And, I've been out here 33 years now, so I'd be happy to take you on a little tour. And if you're interested in birds and dogs, you could come up and see us. We live in the foothills. Um,
Fabulous.
so I will give it to you. It's T as in Tony, J as in John, and then my last name, Catanese, Catanese @gmail.com.
Perfect. And we'll put that up and encourage our viewers to reach out and make a new friend. If nothing else, Tony is an inspiration and we're all the better for it. Thank you for coming to share with us. Thank you for being my friend. And we will look forward to talking again. There's so much more to talk about.
Okay, that sounds great. And I have a big thank you to you for being the person you are.
Thank you,
Because
Tony.
you're an inspiration also.
I appreciate that so much.
Okay.
And we'll talk to you soon. And to my viewers, we'll be right back.